All right, everybody. Welcome to another session of our Systems for Success. My name is Katelyn Fulton with Century 21 Percy Fulton, and we have a really special guest today, Michael. I'm sure you guys are all getting tired of hearing me every week, so it's nice to have a guest speaker. Michael has spoken to you guys in the past. He's a home inspector, works throughout the GTA, so he did leave his contact information in the comments below. And as he said, he's got some special offers for you guys. So if you want to get in touch with him, his contact information will be below. And I'm going to send out a recording of this session as well at the end with all of his information so you guys can get a hold of him. But yeah, today we're going to be talking all about foundational and structural defects in a home. We are starting to see a shift in our market, so hopefully that means we're going to be getting some more home inspections done for your buyer clients. But as well as if you're thinking about doing a listing and you want to get some sort of inspection done before you list the property, Michael can also assist with that, as well as through condos and homes. So if you guys are looking for an inspector resource to add to your tool belt, Michael is going to be a great resource. I know he's got a lot of information to kind of throw at us today, so we're really excited to hear from you, Michael. And again, if you guys have any questions at all, please leave your mics on mute for now and leave your questions in the comments below, and Michael will either get to them, I guess, throughout the presentation or at the end of it. So definitely, if as you have questions, leave them there. I know I've got people on Facebook as well. So all my Facebook people, also leave your comments there and I will relay them back to Michael as well. But let's get to it. We're really excited to have you, Michael. So I'm going to let you kind of take the reins now, and I'm going to sit back and relax today.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Katelyn. It's really good to be here. Again, my name is Michael Schmidt. I'm with Housemaster Home Inspections. We do home, condo, pre-listing inspections throughout the GTA. We go from Burlington to Ajax, Brampton, Vaughan, Markham, all the way down to the water and beyond. We frequently travel to Hamilton, Oshawa, Newmarket, Barrie. But when we do get outside those earlier parameters that I mentioned, we do have to consider that in our fee, but we do go to Hamilton quite regularly, Barrie probably once a month. So keep us in mind. We also do mold, radon, asbestos testing. So if you have any of those needs, please keep us in mind. I did mention that we have a special going on, and I mentioned my contact information. Since I know you're only able to see the chat when you are logged on, I'm going to post it one more time. So everybody here now, you can see, I just put it in the quote. There's my contact information. We have a special going on. You must email me to receive that. $50 off a home inspection, $25 off a condo inspection. So as Katelyn mentioned, we'll be taking questions, I guess, by chat. Katelyn, maybe if I can ask you for your assistance to look at that chat, because when I have my slideshow up, I'm not able to look at it. But please feel free to ask questions throughout, and Katelyn, just chime in when there's a breaking point and let me know if there's anything. And at the end, I'm happy to ask any questions, not just about structure, but about other things. If you have questions about other home issues or the market or pre-listings, I'm happy to answer those as well. So without further ado, let me bring up my slideshow and share this screen with you. And we'll talk about structure. Can everybody see that all right? Maybe type yes in the chat if or no, more importantly, if you can't see it. Yeah, okay, excellent. So, yeah, this is our company. Again, here's my information. You can find us at housemastertoronto.com. So we're talking about common concerns and issues. This is a series of different presentations I have, but this one is focused on structure and foundations. I find that a lot of people really like this particular presentation because these are questions that clients have. These are questions that buyers have. These are the questions that are hard to answer And I would even go so far to say not all home inspectors know the answers to these questions. So obviously, foundation and structure is one of the major issues that we look at with a home in a home inspection. There's always limitations to those, to what we can do as home inspectors. We can only inspect what we can see, but we are looking for various cracks when we can see the foundation, either on the outside or the inside of the home in the basement. We're looking at that to see what kind of defects exist and how those may be impacting the overall structure. Now, here we have an American icon, Falling Water, Frank Lloyd Wright's famous masterpiece of architecture. And that said, even since it was first constructed, there were questions about if it had sufficient strength. And because when the formwork was removed, that's what holds the concrete in place. The first floor cantilever, that part that hangs over the waterfall, actually deflected or sunk, sagged 1 3/4 inches, which seems like a small amount, but it's really quite significant. It's something that you could notice with the naked eye if you were looking at it. And it's something that led to cracking in the from the downward movement on the parapet balcony on the second floor. So this is stuff that even really famous architects, even really famous homes, even very expensive homes can have defects that later need additional support. And as a buyer, or as someone who's representing a buyer, you want to know what those issues are before you walk in. May not be that it's a no buy, but it's just something that you definitely want to know about, so you know how to correct that. Oops, excuse me. So here we have maybe something more traditional that we're all seeing. And this is the base of the foundation. You can see that the cracking is rather pronounced. Now, the question becomes, is this topical? Is this structural? This is something where from the outside, that looks bad. And it's definitely something that is going to require additional investigation as we enter the home or as we walk around the rest of the outside to see how deep it is, to see if we can see through those cracks from the inside to the out. But regardless, if this is becoming structural or not, depending on what we see elsewhere, this is something that's going to have to be repaired. The issue here is that, or the concern here is this affecting the structural integrity of that concrete wall? Now, here on the flip side, this is something maybe more common. This is something you'll see more frequently. Is you'll kind of see that topical flaking of the foundation coating on the concrete foundation wall, or maybe even the block wall, depending on what you have. Now, this is nothing to worry about, or only slightly some concern there. That flaking, that parging that's on the front of that wall, that does have some what do I want to say? Some protection from water ingress, and replacing that foundation coating is a good idea. But at this level, when it's that kind of flaking, that's something that's not to be concerned about from a structural point of view. Here we have a vertical crack. Now, there's a few things we look at when we're looking at a crack. We want to look at, is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it diagonal? How big is the crack? And is there movement? Is it just separating straight across, or does it have some kind of rotation or like a lip on it? This both is a rather large crack. I think it's probably about anywhere from a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch, probably more than a 1/4 inch. And while cracks at the corner are common because that's often where there's maybe a downspout or where water collects, and that can lead to differential settlement of the foundation leading to that crack. It is definitely something at a minimum we're going to want to look at a little closer and you're going to want to correct the grading at a minimum to make sure that it doesn't continue. The issue here is that first and foremost, this could produce water ingress on the interior of the home. It could also lead to further cracking. It looks like there's probably some kind of aluminum or wood siding above it, or maybe vinyl siding above it, but it could lead to cracking in a brick facade wall. And if it was continued, if water was continued to collect in that corner, maybe that downspout had been disconnected, maybe the grounds are just naturally funneling water towards that corner, it could lead to continued settlement. In other words, continued sinking of that footing that could lead to structural issues. So here we come inside to the foundation, and we see another crack. This one's diagonal. It's smaller, but you can see that this is leading to water ingress in the home. If you can't see actual water coming in, you can definitely see the remains of what the water brought with it. In other words, dirt. This particular one was sealed, and we do look to see how it was sealed while we're there. While we can't always confirm the methods that were used, we look for certain styles of filling the crack. Is it done with just caulking? Is it done with injection crack fill? Nothing is 100% guaranteed, but there are certain methods that are better than others. But at a minimum, if this wasn't filled, you would want to make sure that it was, to make sure that you keep the water out of your basement. The other issues are, if there is water coming in, that water can push against the wall, and particularly in a cold climate like Canada, that water that's behind the wall in the earth can freeze and expand, and that can push the wall. So again, a lot of these things, while they're showing their symptoms in the foundation wall, that's what the cracks are. They're like a symptom of a larger problem. We want to take care of that larger problem. We want to get that water to be flowing out into the yard, not towards the foundation. So here we have some cracking in some block work. This is something that I would refer to a foundation specialist and possibly even an engineer. And the reason I say that is, while it is common, there's a couple of things that are going on. Not only do you see the cracking, which is an indication of differential settlement. In other words, one area sunk or raised at a different level than the other part, but you can see there's a little lip on it. And that means that part of the foundation has pushed in, where the other part of the foundation has not. It has stayed in place. That kind of difference is a larger issue than just normal, say, shrinkage cracking as concrete cures. This means that there is foundation movement. This means that the soil on the outside, or possibly heaving from frozen ice, is pushing that wall. And that's something that is structural in nature and could impact the rest of the overall structure. In this case, it seems very much in line with either hydrostatic water-based movement or ice, because you can kind of see there at the bottom that the part of the bottom is moved and the other has not. And that is more of an indication of where the frost line is. So here is a horizontal crack. When you have excessive lateral pressure, in other words, excessive sideways movement, it will result in a horizontal crack. Horizontal cracks are known to be the more concerning of cracks that we find in foundations, because it is an indication of foundation movement, usually from soil pressures or hydrostatic pressure. When I say hydrostatic, I mean water pressure. It is structural in nature, and the foundation is what is holding up the structure above. So the wood framing that is above the basement that holds up the walls and the floors and the roof of your home is resting on the foundation. If that foundation gets pushed so much and it buckles and falls and collapses, that is going to impact the rest of the home. And so this is something that is serious. It's something that needs to get taken care of. This is definitely something that needs to be looked at by an engineer. There are ways of correcting this. You want to start on the outside with whatever is forcing this to happen. Usually grading, downspouts, maybe there's a hill, something is forcing water or some other thing to push on that and create that issue. And then it's maybe not necessarily rebuilding the wall, but there's different methods, different materials. You could put in pilasters. You could put in, there's certain almost like strapping, and they put posts out underground, and then they screw it back to kind of jack the wall back up into level position. And also those stay there permanently there so that they don't, so that wall doesn't push anymore. But given enough pressure, that wall is going to move. So it's always the first order of business to take care of what pressure is being put on that wall. So here's something. It looks much smaller in nature, but it's something to be something to consider and something we look for. You look down at the bottom of that brick wall, and you can see that the patio has sunk a couple of inches. Okay, so all homes, all new homes especially, are going to have a little bit of settlement over time, and the home itself will settle, but particularly the backfill and the walks, driveway, landscaping around the outer edges of the home are going to settle. And the reason is because that is all dug out during construction, and then it is backfilled. And that is loose soil. It is not compacted, untouched soil, which is what the foundation is built on. And so over time, that will compress with seasonal conditions, with just natural weight of water and the soil on itself, acting on itself, and the patios or sidewalks acting on that soil. So you can expect this in new construction and in general over many years. The issue here, looping it back to the slide that we just saw before, is if that is settling so much that it is allowing water to pool in that patio or at that sidewalk or between the two homes, that could mean that that water is pushing back towards the home. And if that water is pushing back towards the home, that could result in these pressures that I was discussing, that is forcing that wall to push in and crack and buckle. So these things are small. Landscaping is always more expensive than you want it to be, but for a few $1,000s, maybe $5,000, you could save yourself $25,000, $35,000, $50,000 in extreme structural issues. So take care of the outside of the house so it doesn't lead to these larger structural issues with your home. Okay, and I think you all saw it, but that's what I was talking about. Now this is called honeycombing. Yeah. So this is oftentimes what happens when they're pouring cement and they run out and they top it up. In general, this is not affecting the structural integrity of the wall. Some air pockets, or the other issue it could be is that they didn't vibrate the concrete while it was curing in the form. Now, some air pockets are not going to cause significant structural defects to a wall. It's oftentimes more cosmetic in nature, and then oftentimes these things aren't visible because they're behind closed walls, or they're underneath the earth, or we put a foundation coating on them and we don't see them. But sometimes the air pockets are significant. Sometimes they're significant enough that they can lead to issues of water collection, and that can lead to deterioration, which is what we're seeing here. You can see a little deterioration in the largest hole there. And of course, that does need to be filled in and maintained to make sure that it doesn't affect the structural integrity of the wall. So here we're seeing some cracking again, and we're seeing some intense settlement, okay? So before we had seen some more minor settlement where it was maybe a couple of inches. This is like a good 8 inches of settlement, and that has settled, and they've just continued to pave over it and not dealt with whatever issue is going on. I can't tell you exactly why this settlement was occurring. If the backfill was incredibly soft, if the soil conditions were just softer than normal, different soils have different consistencies. Sometimes there might be other issues. A home might have been constructed near a river's stream bed that continues to have soft soils that continue to flow. But you can also see there's this horizontal settlement. There's something at play here that is a larger issue that needs to be investigated and corrected. But suffice it to say, this is something that that is going to require additional investigation, oftentimes by a foundation specialist or an engineer to correct this. So it seems like a rather minor thing, and it is a minor thing. This is something you can go to Home Depot. If you work with Housemaster, there's something really nice we do for all our buyer and seller clients, even our mold and other services clients. They get automatically, what do I want to say, not submitted, but automatically added to our buyer benefits program. It's something that they can use or not use. You can view these various offers when you download your inspection report. You can opt out if you want, but it offers different discounts to places like Lowe's or whatever to go and get home rental supplies at 10% off, whatever it might be at various suppliers. So to go take advantage of that once you move in and go get a new downspout is something you can do yourself. But so many people just put it off and put it off and put it off. You may remember that crack at the very beginning where it was at the corner. Well, this is likely the cause before they added that downspout. If you have a downspout that is terminating at the foundation, all of the water that is coming off your roof every time it rains, gallons and gallons and gallons of water, all being deposited in that area. Not only will it, make your landscaping not look so nice, like it's washed away the mulch here, but it will also soften that soil, and that can lead to settlement, and that will lead to cracking in your foundation and cracking in your bricks, and it likely will lead to water getting into your basement. So this is something that's a very, very inexpensive fix, but it is one of the primary factors that leads to corner settlement and foundation settlement in general, is poorly directed downspouts or downspouts that are terminating right at the foundation. And that could very likely lead to something like this. Now you can see that this crack, larger at the top, smaller at the bottom, that's classic differential settlement. In other words, one side, let's look here, the right-hand side is settling or sinking more than the left-hand side. And that is forcing that corner to go down. As we go to the left, where that crack is smaller, that is not sinking as much. So the crack at the bottom is smaller, the crack at the top is widening as that pulls away from the other part of the wall at that kind of point where the lower part is. So that leads to the stair step cracking, that leads to the larger at the top, smaller at the bottom crack. This is something that could occur from that picture that I just showed you. Okay, this could also happen due to that the grading. In other words, the grounds directing water to a corner or side of the house like this. And when you have a crack that large at the top, you're looking at more than 1/4 inch of a crack. It's very easy for water to get in. It's very easy for drafts or even bugs or vermin to get in. So this is something that you want to correct, not only so it doesn't lead to structural issues, so it doesn't lead to other things. I was just speaking about the grounds. The grading or the grounds around the property are a huge way to keep water away from your home. You can see here that this grading is not good. It is not good at all. While as you look at the back of the property, you can see the fence slowly slopes away from the home. You can see that the backyard is sloping away from that back wall where the chimney and those various vent pipes for your HVAC equipment are located. You can see the gray, like a nice gentle slope away from the house. However, right at the edge of the house, you can see that it's all back sloped back towards the home. Now, it does look like the grass is in. It's been in for a while. It's not fresh mulch. It's been mowed at least once. It appears to have taken root. They did not do this grading properly. So that is basically a funnel into your basement. You can see at the top left where there's a downspout coming off the roof. All of that water that collects could just funnel right into that area, and it has nowhere to go but into your basement. If that isn't going to lead to structural issues, it can lead to water issues in your basement. And nobody likes their carpet to be damaged. Nobody likes their storage or their office or their bedroom to be damaged or have mold in it. So these are all things that could happen when water gets in your basement, and it's because of that poor grading. This is what could happen. Different home. This is an older home. You can tell because it has a block wall rather than concrete. But here's water coming in, and that black stuff, that is likely mold. Okay, so this is obviously water ingress. Mold does not consume rock or inorganic material like concrete or block walls, but it will eat organic material. And sometimes that is dust on those walls. Sometimes it's dirt or other organic material that is on the walls. Sometimes it is certain types of paint. So if you do see mold on a wall, it doesn't always, and you're wondering why that is, you wouldn't think that would be having a food source on a concrete or block. That is the reason. And the other issue here is not only do you want to keep water out of your basement, but this is an indication of a bigger problem to come. As I mentioned, if you have water pressure behind that wall, that could lead to problems, structural problems. So you want to take care of that. Here's another indication of water in the basement. This particular one is a brick foundation. It has a bench footing. It looks like maybe they lowered the basement, but you can actually see the water standing there on the floor. One thing that you should know is that almost all old homes with basements will have some form of seepage. And I would even go so far to say all basements may have some form of seepage or are at least vulnerable to some form of seepage. Keeping water out of your basement is about mitigating these problems. Some of the things I talked about, adjusting the grading, making sure there's a slope away from your property, making sure you have downspouts that are correctly lengthened so that they direct the water 4 to 6 feet or more away from your foundation, particularly if you're in downtown Toronto and you have very close homes. You want them to go even further away, and you don't want to screw up your neighbor. But particularly brick, stone foundations, you're going to find them to be more seepy than a concrete foundation. Here you can see, if you look close, there is not mortar between those bricks. So these bricks not only do they have seepage, that seepage has led to the mortar deteriorating. Older mortar is weaker. It almost turns to powder. You could just like flake it off. But the homeowner, not being a mason, not maybe being confident in his skills to mix mortar and replace it in the concrete, or maybe just because he was familiar with caulking, has decided to caulk all of these bricks. So the caulking will do several things. It won't last forever. That water is eventually going to wear it out and pull it away. It'll just kind of like pull off. It won't provide the proper structural strength for the brick, and it won't allow the bricks to breathe as they should. I have met some masons. They don't like bricks to be painted, particularly in basements. They don't like mortar to be covered with caulking because it won't allow the mortar to breathe. This will always have a baseline amount of moisture in it, and that moisture needs to come off and it needs to evaporate. Otherwise, it could lead to larger problems that can allow the bricks or the mortar to crumble. And that, again, will lead to a structural issue. So all of these things combined, the water that is present on the outside, but also the poor handyman work here to try to solve the problem has ultimately just made this worse. Now, here's a basement with mold. Here's a pretty extreme case of mold. You can see it throughout the wall. As a home inspector, when we find mold like this, it's pretty certain that that's mold. But we have to talk in language for legal reasons, and we would refer to this as suspect mold until it is verified by a lab. But make no mistake, this is a concern. This is very likely mold and possibly multiple types of mold. You would probably want to have this tested to verify what types are present to know what kind of harm was caused. And mold comes from, mold needs three things to grow. And two of those things we have in every single house. It's a temperature above 68 degrees Fahrenheit for most molds. And it is a food source. In other words, organic material like paper, wood, cloth, some of the other things that I discussed earlier. And then the last thing it needs is water. So if it has these other things, if you introduce water, mold will grow, okay? And if it is allowed to grow uncontrollably, you will grow full colonies like we're seeing here. This is a health concern, or at least a potential health concern, because any molds in this quantity, there's likely going to be mold spores in the air that are in excess of what you should have in your breathing environment. Again, you don't know that until you do a mold test, an air sample test to verify. But this is something that's extreme, and it is something that you may go unnoticed. This is something that was found after the wood paneling was pulled off the wall. You can see the wood paneling behind or to the left-hand side. So this is something that you might see that the mold is, or you might see that the paneling is warping. You might see that the paneling is flaking paint, but you may not know the extent until you take it off. But this is another reason why we want to keep water out of the house, is because it can lead to potential health concerns. By the way, at this size, this is not something, even if you were a healthy person, this is not something you would want to tackle on your own. This is something to call the professionals on. So this is a sump pump. I'm sure many of you have seen these and knew exactly what it was when I brought it up. But some people, new agents, but even seasoned agents who aren't used to new construction or aren't living out in the burbs, haven't always seen a sump pump. So what a sump pump is it's basically this pit in the foundation floor. And you can see there's a tube that is leading to that pit. It's about the size of a large bucket, and that tube comes in from the foundation. That tube is called a weeping tile, but it is just a fancy name for a tube with slits in it. And as the water in the ground around your house, the groundwater meets the foundation wall. It will oftentimes meet a dimple board or some other kind. Sometimes it's just a bitumen wall or some other kind of skinned wall, and that won't allow it to go into the foundation wall itself. But what the dimple board does especially is there's a bit of an air gap, and it allows the water to trickle down on the outside of that wall and have some place to go. And that place that it goes is that tube, that weeping tile. That water will collect just like it does in your roof drains, and it will be driven to this pit, okay? And then this pit, it will collect, and there's a pump there at the bottom, and you can see the tube is connected to that pump, and then that will pump that water out, oftentimes to the outside of your house. And very similar to roof drains and such, your downspouts, you want that to terminate 4 to 6 feet away from your foundation at a minimum. You do not want it to be coming back towards the home. And you want to make sure that the pipe is large enough that it is not going to freeze solid in the winter and back up into your basement. Oftentimes you want it to be longer than that. And sometimes it is allowed in Ontario. You can have that pump into a sewer system in certain ways, or a storm drain system in certain ways. So it does not always need to go to the outside. And just because you have a weeping tile system does not mean that you have a sump pump. Some weeping tile systems are gravity fed. In other words, gravity does the job and it takes it to the storm drain, or it takes it out into the yard in some other way, and the water just disperses in the yard away from the house so it doesn't come in the foundation. But that's what this is, and that is its purpose, is to collect the water into one place and pump it out so it's not a problem and it isn't affecting the foundation. So this is a little off topic, but it does have something to do with structure. Ventilation, whether we're talking about a kitchen fan, a bath fan, or an exhaust for a washer dryer, a dryer. You want those to go on to the outside of the home. If that, you do not want them to come into the crawl space, as is pictured here. Or you do not want it to go into the basement, or you do not want it to go into the attic. That moist air will lead to high humidity in those areas, particularly in a crawl space that's already naturally humid. And that will lead to mold development, and that can lead to wood rot, either through the mold or just through high levels of humidity. And if there is wood rot in your floor structure, that is going to be a structural problem. Crawl spaces, particularly in and around Toronto, are almost never done right. And they oftentimes do have structural issues. And I have seen just horror shows. I posted just the other day, there was a colleague of mine, he had the part of the beam held up by a water tank. They just took their old water heater and started using it as a support post in the basement or in the crawl space because the floor was sagging. So, but especially you want to keep your ventilation out of those areas. If it is an attic or an unconditioned crawl space, and most crawl spaces are unconditioned, meaning they are not heated and cooled with the rest of the home, that vent line also, not only does it need to terminate on the outside of the home, it needs to be insulated. Because if it is not insulated, this one is not. You can also see another vent line, probably for a furnace or something in the back. It's probably ductwork. That should also be insulated, and that is so it doesn't develop condensation. Condensation will also lead to moisture development, which could lead to mold and could lead to high humidity in the basement. So all of those things you need to consider when you're running vent lines for baths, kitchens, and laundry rooms. Here we are. Here's a perfect example here in an attic. You have that bath fan going up into the attic. Bam, mold. So you have mold on the framing members, you have mold on the sheathing. This could lead the sheathing to sag. It could lead to potential roof issues. It could, if it was sagging enough, it could lead to premature shingle deterioration. And And if the sheathing fails, it could lead to roof leaks as well. So all of these things are things that you want to make sure that you are done properly. And these are all things we look for with our home inspection when we're looking in those various spaces, crawl space and attics. Here we are. This could be related to mold. This is more than likely due to roof leakage. Roof leakage is another introduction of moisture, so it has led to mold, but not for ventilation reasons, because of the roof leakage. Again, this can lead to structural issues, so you want to take care of roof leaks. You can see there's some water stained or mold stained rafters or trusses. I guess it looks like it's more rafters here. But that could lead to deterioration of those structural members, and that could lead to sagging of your roof. So these are things you want to take care of promptly to make sure that they don't lead to issues. Okay, here's some more structural issues. Over notching of structural members. So I've seen this more than once in the garage. I've seen it in standalone homes. I've seen it in townhouses. The garage was built with a certain type of garage door. Maybe the garage door never had a motor. It was just a manual style garage door. They decided to add the motor later, but they never thought about the motor in the first place. So we're simply just going to cut this beam to accommodate the motor drive shaft, and bam, you have just caused serious structural damage to the floors above that. Let's say you have a bedroom above there. Let's say you have a kitchen above there, whatever it may be. God forbid you have a bath with a full bathtub or a water bed that's going to have an intense weight on this particular beam. But the structural integrity of this beam is compromised, and that could affect the floor structure, could lead to sagging floors, and it could ripple throughout the home and cause other issues in other areas of the home. That's the problem with structure. When you have a structural issue, it can cause a bit of a domino effect that can lead to other kind of foreseen issues. So this beam would need to be replaced or resupported in some other way. But of course, you don't want to put a post right there because you want to drive your car in and out of your garage. Had they encountered this issue and given a little more thought, they could have possibly used a different style of garage door. They now have these motors that are mounted on the side. They don't have a similar type of chain shaft that's needed to pull up the garage door. But you know, whether this have been the homeowner or whether this be a contractor, some people just don't think. I would say that some garage door specialists, in quotes, could have even done this. Sometimes you'd be surprised with the electrician that overly notches things, or the plumber especially overly notches joists, beams in order to accommodate that plumbing or that toilet. So they just cut right through structural members, not taking into consideration the effects on structure that might have. And this is something that could happen. This could lead to that floor sagging so much. Now, this is an extreme case. This is not the same home. But this is an extreme case where the floor has sagged so much, you can see that that it has come below that baseboard. Now, that's the real tell. Oftentimes, these baseboards have been put in after the fact. They've been adjusted, tweaked. This isn't as obvious. But in this case, I would say that's almost 2 inches. You can kind of see from the baseboard. When you walked on that, you would feel it. You would feel yourself almost take a half a step down as you walk across that floor. It would be very obvious. It's oftentimes smaller issues that we notice as home inspectors, but small issues can lead to larger issues, and that's why we bring them up. And this stuff is not cheap. This stuff can be brought up. I just did some structural issues in my house. I had a floor, I live in a 130-year-old home in downtown Toronto. I have a staircase that was installed 100 years ago in a way that we would not do it these days. And while it was maybe acceptable at the time, it didn't have the proper strength below it. It didn't have the proper support. And so over the past 130 years, it has sunk. And we were able to bring up the floor an inch, inch and a half. And now the floor is fully level. It still sags because all old homes will have some level of sagging in the floor. So it's maybe not level across the entire floor, but at the point where the staircase is, it is now level. And so some of these things can be corrected, but they are pricey. The price tag on that structural repair for that staircase, and this wasn't even repairing, oh, they repaired a couple of two stairs at the very front, the two steps that had kind of pulled away. But this was not rebuilding of the staircase, but just the structural repair in the basement, $15,000. Okay, so that's what we paid to correct this. But it was a major issue. It was causing the stairs to pull apart. It was causing the wall to pull apart from the floor. It was leading to some significant cracking and damage of the plaster. So as part of that, all the cosmetic finishes, the wall was the drywall was rehung, it was painted, it was plastered, it was sanded, it was mudded and taped. All of that happened in addition to the structural issues. A new footing was poured, a post and beams were put up as part of that ticket price. But these things can be corrected, but they are costly, so you want to try to avoid them from the outset. So here we are back in a crawl space, looking at framing. The framing above, as I was mentioning with this staircase that I just had rebuilt, it needs to be supported underneath. The joists and the beams need to be supported either on the foundation walls, or if they stretch too far, they need to be supported by a post or a pier or a column. Those are all various names, slightly different on all the same thing, but something that supports it from underneath. This is not an acceptable post. This is not an acceptable column. You cannot just take random construction supplies and stack them up. This probably almost definitely does not have a proper footing. It is not all secured together. And while shims are acceptable to be putting underneath framing members to get them a real tight, snug fit, this is, if I'm being generous, overly shimmed. So this you would want a proper column built. It could be metal, it could be done from block or concrete. Here's what I was talking about with the plumber. So again, overly notched framing members. You might want that bathtub there. You might want that toilet there. But your plumber will either have to get creative, or you might have to make compromises on your bathroom design in order to accommodate the various plumbing fixtures. Do not cut through structural members like this. That is going to, at a minimum, have to be re-supported, or now you have to redo the tub and you have to redo the joist. This is some water damage, it looks like. This could be due to high humidity levels in a crawl space. I did not take this photograph. This came from my head office. But you can see the wood rot present in the floor. Now, whether this came from long-term water damage, either from, like, say, a toilet leak, which is likely, you never see the toilet leak. It's just kind of leaking down into the floor over time. It leads to soft floors. Or if it's due to high humidity in the crawl space or basement, that over time has just led those floorboards to rot. But this is a situation where you may not know a leak is happening. You may not know wood rot is happening. But that's why we have to kind of put two and two together. If we feel the floor is soft, if we see the floor is sagging, you do want to err on the side of caution, maybe consider the worst, and have a look, because this is a situation where it's not going to give you any warning. You might just put your foot through the floor at some point. I don't know if any of you guys listen to As It Happens, but about 6 months ago, there was a really great story on As It Happens. There was a family out in New Brunswick or maybe Newfoundland or Nova Scotia. It was out east. And this guy was walking through his bedroom and just went right through the floor. And there was a well that had been, the house had been built on top of. And they were probably using this well to serve the water needs of this home. But at one point they got plumbing and they decided to just seal over it. Well, they didn't properly seal this well. And for like 50, 60, 70 years, this moist water from this well was just permeating and rotting this wood until this gentleman walked right through the floor and went over his head in water and had to be rescued. Really interesting story to look up if you're at all interested. So in addition to be properly supported, we want to make sure that what our floors are supported with are doing their job. If you are finding that while screw jacks are allowed in residential construction permanently, so these things can be screwed in place and they do not need to be replaced with a, what do I want to say, like fully fitted, custom built post, that they should not be buckling. Something has either happened. Installation was they overly screwed this thing until they damaged it, which when it's damaged, it's compromised and it won't perform the way it should. Or the home has had some other significant kind of movement, either with extreme loads from the top that have been pushed down on this to buckle that column, or conversely, extreme forces from beneath, some kind of heaving, maybe due to soil pressures or water or something else. That would be extremely unique. But clearly this post is compromised and should be replaced with something that is going to do the job. Again, here we're seeing some floors that have settled significantly. Usually you will see a little space between the drywall and the floor. And then when the finishes are put in place, in other words, the baseboards are put in, they hide that small gap. But when you have a couple of inches, the floors have sunk. And so this is an indication of something, an issue going on underneath. That's something we would want to investigate further in the basement or the crawl space. Okay, here we go again with the plumber. It doesn't matter if it's a solid wood joist. It doesn't matter if it's an engineered piece of lumber, as in this I joist. While you can notch lumber the right way, you can put a hole through joists of a certain size. You can put a hole through engineered lumber of a certain size. Notching it in this way, where you are taking apart that top member, cutting that top member, or if the hole is larger than a certain diameter based on the requirements for the depth of that I joist, that is not allowed. This has broken that top member, and that is going to lead to structural deficiencies with that I joist. So conversely, on this particular one, I'm not seeing any problems. These might be a little too close to the top, but by and large, you can drill through engineered lumber just fine. You can have multiple holes. These diameters are not too big. They may be a little too close to the top, but in fact, I actually want to see my notes. Sorry about this. Okay, yeah, this is fine. It's just there. It just needs to be installed according to manufacturer instructions. So as long as these are not too close to the top, or too big around, this is fine. This is how it should look. Okay, well, here's a funny one. Obviously, they put an addition or a different type of siding here, um, and covered up that that vent. But the reason that it's being mentioned here is not just because that vent isn't going to do its job, but vents shouldn't be too close to the ground. There's a number of reasons for this. They can be covered in snow. Therefore, the vents won't allow the moist air out. They can be too small. They won't allow the moist vent air out. But also, they can be problematic for wood destroying insects. In this particular slide, while we can't see them, there were either termites or carpenter ants that were able to enter the home through this particular entry point into the home. Now, this is a termite tube. This is something that you might look for. So these are oftentimes, they look like dirt. They're the ways that termites move from one area to the other. So they're not underground, but they are concealed in an underground style environment, which is what they like to be. So looking for termite tubes is something that we do when we're in certain areas of the city that are known for termites or other wood destroying insects. And there is some termite damage. Termites do exist in Toronto. There are certain neighborhoods and areas where they exist. I'm speaking specifically of the beaches, the upper beaches, and around the Humber River. But really, they can be almost anywhere in the city, depending on, not depending on where you live, but specifically if you're near water. But I have found some in my neighborhood. I have found some, so in other words, near Lansdowne, near Earl's Court, Earlsdale. I've found them in Little Italy. I have found them down by, say, Queen and Spadina. I attended a seminar with Aetna, who is one of the leading termite experts in town. And they've told me that they're finding them downtown because they use these giant wood timbers to hold back soil as they're building these deep foundations for these high rises. And they do not take those out of the ground. And so those are basically just feeding frenzies for termites downtown. And while that is not causing any structural issues with these high rises, what it does lead to is termite damage inside garages, inside storage spaces, inside lobbies of these high rises where they might eat wood finishes, wood furniture, anything from like boxes, paper components that are in storage, leather furniture. I'm told they even, sometimes termites will even eat things that are not organic. They're looking for the organic material. So sometimes this is separate from the high-rise story, but they've even eaten tubes that are facilitating pools. So the water lines to pools, they will eat through in the beaches because they're just looking for some kind of food source. So long story short is, this can deteriorate the wood to a point where it leads to significant structural issues. And this is something to take care of promptly. If you're living in the beaches, if you're living in the upper beaches, if you're living in around Humber River, you're going to make termite treatment, in other words, periodic poisoning to the area on an annual basis to mitigate these kind of issues. Okay, this is an indication of some holes that have been drilled into the concrete wall to inject the treatment into the concrete wall itself. I'm not entirely sure how it reaches the termites, if it absorbs into the soil or as they're burying their or making their tubes, they come into contact with it on the concrete and it poisons them. But this is one indication, if you don't find termite tubes, if we don't find any termite damage, that there maybe has been some termite activity at the home, is these kind of holes. These can be confused with other concrete holes. Sometimes you see them that are basically tiebacks for the forms when you're making a concrete foundation. Okay, so again, here's some other wood destroying insect. This is specifically carpenter ants. Very similar patterns to termites. The difference is the carpenter ants use these for their homes. Termites use them for food. So carpenter ants, the difference is you'll see basically sawdust, maybe a little bit, but mostly it'll be clean holes. Whereas the termites, you'll see like a lot of sawdust, but that's actually not the sawdust, that's their poo or crass. And so if you see a lot of sawdust, what looks like sawdust, that's the termite poo. But really the result is the same. The structural integrity of the wood has been compromised, and you need to take care of it. In some cases, you may need to replace structural components. In other cases, the structural integrity may still be there, but you need to take care of the termites or the carpenter ants. So, and that is where I end my presentation. I really appreciate your attention, and hopefully that was informative and gave you some new information, some things that you can look out for on your own and inform clients of. But before I go, does anybody have any questions or comments?
That was really great, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, does anybody have questions? I don't have any on Facebook yet. You gave us so much information, I don't know.
Well, thanks. I sure can talk, but I like to have a conversation. So really, if there is anybody out there who has any questions, whether they're related or unrelated, maybe questions about other issues, I'm always happy to talk. How do we know the age of windows from Ria? Good question, Ria. Well, oftentimes you can tell the age of windows. The starting point is the age of the home. Windows, generally speaking, last maybe about 20 years, okay? And so if the home is newer than 20 years and you know the age of the home, you probably know the age of the windows. Now, if it's older than that, or you think they've been replaced or something, or you want to know if they've been replaced, you can look at the windows themselves. And oftentimes the windows will either have a date that's between the two panes. If it's insulated glass, they'll be between the two panes, and sometimes it's like on that that metal or insulating portion between the two panes of glass. Sometimes also it is actually on the glass itself. They might have etched it in the glass or stamped it on the glass, and still sometimes it may actually be on the rails. So if you have a casement window, you can crank it open and see if it has a date or a sticker on it. Sometimes it will tell you the manufacturer, the company who installed it, the date. Or if it's a hung window, so it goes up and down, sometimes you can flip that out and look for the same kind of stamp or label on the inside. Anything else? Well, again, if there were any latecomers, I'm Michael Schmidt. I'm with Housemaster Home Inspections. We do home, condo, pre-listing inspections. We have a special just for you guys, but you have to email me. I have put that in the chat, and I will just put that in the chat again right now for you. So you can email me, and you get $50 off your next home inspection or $25 off your next condo inspection. We also have a 10% special going on for everybody, not just people who attended this, but everybody. We have 10% going off pre-listing inspections for sellers. So if you are listing a property or you are representing a seller who's selling their home, we have 10% off. So take advantage of that through April 30th. And we also do asbestos testing, mold testing, and radon testing. So if you ever have any questions, I want to be your go-to home inspector. So even if you don't want to email me, you don't want to get on my email list, you're not interested in a free $50, even if you just want information, please take down my number, give me a call, send me an email anytime you come into issues out in the field, you have a quick question, always happy to answer things. And if I can't get back to you right away, I will always try to get back to you between appointments or next business day.
Perfect. But everyone's quiet on the Facebook side, but I just put your email address in there for them too. We had about 25 people on there as well. So hopefully get some more people on there, but that was a really great session. Thanks so much for all of those details. I'm going to have this up on YouTube as well, guys. So if you want to go back and watch anything, but of course, Michael's going to be your expert. So hopefully you guys, if you have any inspections or anything in the future, keep Michael in mind. And yeah, that was great.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. We'll catch up with you guys soon.
Yep, take care. Thanks, everybody.